Good afternoon, and welcome to another session on this gender forum at UNCTAD 15. I am so pleased to welcome this set of panelists who will be speaking on the topic of accountability and advocacy. Who gets to sit at the negotiating table? I think this topic is really a little bit different from the others because we're talking now about translating policy into advocacy and negotiating positions. And with me are an esteemed panel from Asia Pacific, from Latin America and the Caribbean, who will help us think through some of these issues, especially in a context of UNCTAD, where trade negotiations and advocacy is the very meat and bones of the discussion taking place at UNCTAD now. My name is Dr. Jani Vremi. I am director at the Sridath Ramphal Center for International Trade, Law, Policy and Services. And it is my pleasure to welcome all of the panelists here today. With us are Wardarina from the Asia Pacific Forum on Women, Law and Development, Nicole Bedigan Ponte from the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and Marcia Drakes from the CARICOM Office of Trade Negotiations. So they'll each speak for about 10 minutes, after which I will guide them through 2 or more questions, and then really turn the floor over to you, audience, for any questions or comments you'd like to make on their presentations. So we're going to start with Wardarina from the Asia Pacific Forum, and she will say her few opening remarks.
Thank you so much. And then also, first of all, I would like to say thank you for this opportunity to speak in this Gender and Development Forum of UNCTAD. I'm proud to speak not only on behalf of Asia Pacific Forum on Women, Law and Development, but also on behalf of our more than 300 feminist members in 32 countries in Asia and the Pacific. Most of them are grassroots women organizations in the local and the national level. We are part of the feminist movements, but also our members part of the farmers' movements, fisher folks, women with disabilities, urban poor, rural and indigenous women, climate justice movements, Dalit women, women workers, migrant movements, and other people's movements. So in this session, I'm requested to speak on our experience on advocacy, sharing our thoughts on accountability, and then who gets to be at the trade negotiating table. So why grassroots movement to stand against RCEP? This trade agreement will definitely go into impacting women's human rights in many different aspects. One is undermining production of more affordable generic version of life-saving medicines. And then also negatively impact women farmers and indigenous women's rights to seed and food sovereignty, lock in privatization of public services, push women workers' wages even down, and then constrain creation of decent jobs, and also restrict the ability of governments to introduce industrial and fiscal policies that is actually necessary to protect and regulate in the public interest. So in this new post-pandemic reality or pandemic reality that we are still having now, these vulnerabilities will be further deepened and then marginalizing communities even more. And then it's like it is a race to the bottom with women at the bottom. So APWLD and our members, we have been doing a lot of organizing work in the ground. We do a lot of capacity building. We do advocacy and also mobilization on the street. So we conduct feminist participatory action research, for instance, where the grassroots women studies document the impact of trade and investment agreements to their lives and collectively build demands and strategies for advocacy and mobilization. We ensure that we build materials and resources to unpack the impact of these trade deals to women on the ground. We also engage inside and outside different rounds of negotiation, of trade negotiation. Like, for instance, like organize people's meetings or People's Forum on RCEP organized capacity building workshop for women's rights organization and diverse people's organization to influence the process. We mobilize women, mostly women farmers, Dalits, fisher folks, workers and trade unions, rural and indigenous women to participate in the People's Forum and then different round of negotiations of RCEP. We also support national consultation, stronger presence and voices of these women's in public hearing in different countries, including with the parliamentarian. And also we locally based group with the movements against FTA, which is usually more based in the country's capital. So there are a lot of challenges, of course, in this advocacy space, most of it because it is very, very close negotiations, no access to document, limited space for civil society, including women's group. So for instance, in our case, in our advocacy, in RCEP, the different RCEP round of negotiation that we have sometimes only provide 1.5 until 2 hours time. Only that, for the compared to the length of days they usually have their consultation, only 2 hours time for the stakeholder consultations with the RCEP negotiating countries. Sometimes civil society were promised to have more time to express their concern, but only to be cut off and then suddenly said they had less time. So for us, is this really the value of human rights and people's engagement and participation? Civil societies, media, parliamentarian, and even local government have been hardly given any access to this negotiation and in a process that already far from transparency. And then also, RCEP impacts more, I think, than 50% of the world's population and is being negotiated without the knowledge of this population. And then for many governments negotiating this, maybe this trade agreement might be about cost and benefit, about selling or buying, about letters and numbers. But however, for women and many other marginalized community, it is about our life and death. So most of the time, the statements and questions raised by these peoples and social movements are not responded at all by the governments. That's our experience, yeah. And then only to be noted or maybe tick the box exercise. So in contrast, while in Indonesia, for instance, while the Indonesian civil society were only given 2 hours of the stakeholder consultation, the Indonesian chambers of commerce and industry got the whole 2 weeks and have the chance to actually speak and negotiate with the negotiator and also the delegates. And then for one of the important point also to be noted that sometimes in our the availability of space really depends on the advocacy to the host countries that is actually hosting, the round of the negotiation. So this will be extra challenging when we are faced by more and more authoritarian governments and also repressive government that is now happening globally and also in our region in Asia and the Pacific. For us, it's also very clear that the provision of trade and investment agreement that are found to be inconsistent with the human rights obligation of government should be just revised or terminated. That's just the rule, right? And then the UN independent experts actually states that actually the state itself have appointed to ensure human rights are protected globally have already suggested that mega trade agreement like RCEP is violating human rights obligation, and many cases also violates national constitution. So we, the women, and also the people as sovereign power must know that these free trade deals really stand a free trade based on people's rights and needs, or rather it is to maximize corporate interest and power. So the negotiation and adoption that we had on RCEP indicate it's for the latter. It's very clear. as it is done completely in secrecy behind people's back while giving information and decision-making access to corporation. We really must end this political corporate hypocrisy. And then we have been saying that women have been at the heart of the movements to halt the deadly advances, for instance, of the WTO. We will use the same solidarity to stop any trade agreement, be the power to make decisions over our own lives and the future. I would like to end my speech a little bit by saying that, many times that we have heard this, that the argument saying that transparency will probably undermine the administration policy to complete the trade agreements because, the public opposition will be significant. Then for us, it's very, very simple, right? Like there's this group saying it, and then we are very, very agree. If the public wouldn't like it, then don't sign it. And then even more so, while so many governments acknowledge that these inequalities exist and globalization has widened the gap between the rich and the poor, especially in developing countries, they have also expressed their inability to reverse it. So if our governments recognize that this current system no longer works, and then why are we maintaining it? And then, thank you so much. That's the end of my speech.